It's time for another episode of Let's Talk Manufacturing South Carolina, featuring interviews with leaders and influencers across a variety of manufacturing disciplines discussing trending topics in the industry. Let's Talk Manufacturing is part of the Let's Talk Business South Carolina network of B2B talk shows and brought to you by the South Carolina Manufacturing Extension Partnership. And now, coming to you from the Drum Creative Studio, here's your host, longtime South Carolina business publisher, Rick Jenkins.
All right, folks, I am now joined by Steve Logue. He is the general manager at a company called Sensolus. Steve, welcome to the show, man.
Rick, thanks for having me here. And first, +1 tech speak for I agree on AFL. Great company.
They are a great company.
Yeah.
They are a great company. They are on the show from time to time. I always enjoy it.
Yeah, thanks for having me here.
You are welcome. Now, you drove up from Atlanta today. Is that right? That's where you live.
That's right.
Is that correct? You live down in Atlanta, but you all are doing business everywhere, Sensolus.
Yeah, we're national in scope. We're global in scope. A European company that recently planted a flag here in the United States last year, and
Right.
I'm GM for the operation.
Let's talk manufacturing. You are an IoT firm, and I want you to just kind of walk us through. Give me a little bit of the elevator speech, just kind of a brief one, and then we'll dive in a little more. Tell us about Sensolus.
Yeah. So Sensolus, we are an asset tracking company. We build end-to-end solutions to track your assets for industrial manufacturers. And that means we manufacture these trackers right here, about the size of a deck of cards. And we build those in Ireland, actually. And then we build the software, the cloud platform to manage those trackers and the assets that they're connected to. And we do that out of Belgium. Sensolus is a company born in Belgium 11 years ago, and in most European countries now, in the U.S., and soon to expand into Canada and Latin America. And so the whole idea is that for manufacturers, we track your crates, your pallets, your racks that are on the production line in factory wall, between the factory walls, and then also between the factory and the warehouse, between the factory and third-party subcontractors. And the whole idea with our technology is to give you visibility into your assets at all times.
Right, and so now you're getting into supply chain and you're getting into logistics and things like that.
Yeah.
But as we talked before, you all are also in the construction industry. How does it work in the construction industry?
Yeah. There are a few industries that we're strong in. One is industrial manufacturing. The other is construction, specialty equipment, and transport and logistics, of course, right? Like trailers.
Right.
And so in the construction industry, we do things like we track forklifts, we track machinery on construction sites, right? These are high-value assets, right, that you don't want to lose, right? And sometimes we work with companies that rent and lease those out. And if you're the owner of that asset, right, you want to know where that is at all times. And last I would say is, no one can do everything with excellence, right? And so every company and manufacturer, construction firm has an ecosystem of suppliers. And so with our trackers, you can enforce SLAs and make sure, people are doing what they say they're going to do, right?
Enforce what?
SLA, service level agreements. And so ensure compliance, basically.
Right. So this little doomahickey, that's a technical term, goes somewhere.
The Flemish language.
Yeah, right. Goes somewhere on the product, right? On an asset.
That's right.
And if I were to break this open, what do I find in there?
You find a number of things. You find, first of all, an industry-leading battery life, or battery with industry-leading life. And so it's 3-cell lithium battery in there. The batteries can last up to 10 years on that wireless tracker there. So that's the first thing you'll find. You'll find a modem for communications. We connect to AT&T and T-Mobile. We use cellular networks for connectivity. You'll find other electronics in there, like, for example, an accelerometer. An accelerometer, what that will do, this tracker not only tells you where your asset is and the movement of that asset, but also the condition of that asset, like temperature, humidity, orientation of the asset. So there are accelerometers in there with sensors to help you on condition monitoring, basically.
Right.
That's what you'd find in there.
So from a construction perspective, you put this on the bottom of a bulldozer somewhere, it leases out, and all of a sudden I arrive on Monday and it's not there, but somebody took it and now we can find you, right?
That's right.
That type of thing. But
That's
now
right.
let's go into...
Or if you have a yard with tons of trailers in there, right? You can optimize that. I mean, we'll talk a little bit more about the manufacturing use case when you're ready, but yeah, those are the applications of the tractor.
So you have an asset, and that asset could start out on a shipping container as it is making its way over from Belgium, and it could find its way into the port of Charleston, and it could find its way onto that container could be transferred off of that ship onto a rail.
Yeah.
That rail could make its way to the inland port in Greer and come off of that rail and find its way onto a truck. And then
to the site.
And then that asset could go to a warehouse or something. But and then to the site, but whatever. So what I hear you saying is that this gives the person who asset belongs to a way to always know where it is and track it as needed.
That's it. I mean, there's a fancy term in this business called a digital twin.
Digital
That's
twin,
a digital
right.
twin. That tracker is a digital twin of your asset.
Yes.
And it gives you basically, our solutions give you basically online visibility into your assets. And so you might say, oh, what's the business case for that, right? I mean, some might say that's a nice to have and not a must have to know where my assets are. Well,
Yes.
It depends on how you do it today and what your scale is, right? If you're walking around with a clipboard or you're walking around with an Excel spreadsheet tracking where your assets are, it's probably not that efficient once you reach a certain level of scale, right? And so this is an alternative way to track your assets, and then you can look at specific variables, ROI drivers, if you will. For example, in the business of manufacturing, so many manufacturers are making custom crates and racks and pallets to move stuff from point A to point B, parts, assembled goods, finished goods, right? Those racks can cost $5,000 or more, right? Because they're custom made, right? Like Airbus, we work with Airbus and they're making custom racks for engines. And so those racks get lost and they're expensive. Or, those racks could be used a hell of a lot more than they are being used, right? And so our solutions help you to optimize your supply chain, basically, right? And if you have a theft issue, we can deal with that. But there are other things too, like compliance, like sustainability. There are other benefits too.
Yeah. So who uses this more? The customer who owns the asset or the logistics company who transports the asset? So let me just say it this way, is that if I'm a logistics company, I've got a huge client that is spending millions of dollars with me to transport their assets across the world, right? I think that I might want to be sure that I can track them as a logistics company, because if I'm that customer, I'm going to assume you're doing it because I'm insured.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't know. You
Yeah,
tell me.
the answer is both. I mean, we were strong in logistics, we're strong in industrial manufacturing, we're strong in specialty equipment. We also work in environmental solutions too, tracking containers. But it's really both. But I would say our sweet spot is industrial manufacturing because it's reusable packaging, racks, crates, pallets that are non-powered, and that's the key term here. These are wireless trackers. We do have one with a cable that connects to a battery as well, but our sweet spot and what differentiates us from competitors is that we track non-powered assets primarily.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned you work with Airbus.
Yeah.
What does that relationship look like?
That's one of our strongest relationships. We're inside the industrial manufacturing vertical. It's aerospace and automotive that we're really strong, but other areas too. But in the case of Airbus, we started working with them 7 years ago in Europe. Now we work with them globally. They have purchased 25,000 of those trackers, and they're using them to track all their stuff from point A to point B within factory walls, and then between the factory, the warehouse, third-party subcontractors, and the like. And so we have enabled online visibility into their assets, and the relationship has grown over time.
Steve, while you're talking about it, it just reminds me, in March of 2020, this thing occurred called COVID, right? And before March of 2020, there were a lot of people who had never even heard of the term supply chain, right? Just generically speaking. But the supply chain became very obvious And the shortfalls of the supply chain became very obvious when the pandemic hit for a variety of reasons. No need to get into that. But I guess my question for you is when COVID changed the way some of us do business, especially in the logistics world, did it change your company?
Did. As a company, early on, we took a bit of a hit, right? But but COVID spurred the acceleration of digitalization.
Right.
And across all industries, of course, Amazon is a great example in consumer retail. But we are about digitizing your business in terms of, getting visibility into your supply chain, right? Online visibility into your supply chain. So we have seen an acceleration there. And the whole idea of just-in-time inventory, and there were so many disruptions to supply chains during COVID. And so companies want more visibility so they can be proactive about managing their supply chain and not reactive. And then what we're seeing most recently, and you've probably heard this buzzword once or twice, AI, that's affecting our business too. And so in our case, one example of what we're doing is edge intelligence, is putting more intelligence in the tracker, right, rather than in the cloud in terms of location and movement and that sort of stuff, because what we like to talk about is the extreme battery life of these trackers, right? But the more the trackers are communicating to the cloud, the quicker the battery will drain. And so we have been building over the last couple of years more and more intel on the edge. And so that's an example, but we're seeing that as a recent trend, I would say.
Yeah. Let's stick with AI for a second. I'm glad you brought that up. There's hardly, and I've said this on the shows before, but there's hardly a time when a person comes in and sits in that chair right there where we don't discuss AI, regardless of what industry that they may work in. It's touching our lives in a million different ways. Give me a little bit better understanding of how AI is, how you all utilize AI in your world, and logistics in general, supply chain in general.
Edge intelligence is probably the best example of how we're deploying AI in our solutions, but it goes beyond that, because you need data for AI to work, right? And so our cloud platform, the tracker is just part of the story. It's the hardware. The software is what you're using, and I can describe it. You enter into the platform and you get a map of where all your assets are, a list of those, and you can click on each asset and get the exact location and where it's moved from, where it's going to, that kind of stuff. And so the AI aspect of the platform, I would say, is about the manipulation of the data or the processing of the data to give you the insights to take action to make the most of your assets, right? Because it's not good enough to have data just overwhelm you with data if you can't take action with that data and drive your business, right? And so that's what we focus on, is ensuring we're getting we're processing the right data to give you the insights to take action.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff we just refer to as good old-fashioned predictive analytics.
It is, yeah.
Right? You're using big data, as much data as you can to predict things that are going to help you be more efficient and save dollars down the road.
Yeah, and it's possible now because we're getting access to data, computing power, and AI, and the congruence of those three are coming together to allow businesses to do more with what they have. And that's our whole proposition. You have assets, make the most of those assets.
Yeah. You talked about verticals, and we talked about, let's get into that a little bit later, but let's spend some time with that. Okay, so, I know from an overarching perspective, we're talking about industrial manufacturing and a variety of things, but give us a little better idea of the verticals you all deal with.
Yeah. So besides industrial manufacturing, transport and logistics, and our sweet spot is mostly non-powered assets like trailers, and trailers that are maybe not owned by the same company that owns the truck that's hauling them, right? And so maybe they're leased or rented, right? Or owned by third parties, and you want to know where the trailer is, especially the assets within that trailer. And then the last one I would say is tracking high-value specialty equipment. Can be leased, rented as well, or you own it. Like we track forklifts, we track industrial-grade cleaning machines, things like that.
Right. Steve, let's talk about ROI for a second. I can see that this can positively impact someone's company's ROI. I mean, every year, depending, at some point, you're probably going to companies budget to lose. Companies budget to misplace something, to have to replace something. Depending on how big your company is, those can be really big line items. How was ROI impacted by having this little sucker?
Yeah, little sucker. Another Belgian word.
Yes.
First is, what is the ROI about having visibility into your assets? What's the alternative? It's not having visibility, right? Or walking around with a clipboard, or walking around with an Excel spreadsheet, right? Which is prone to human error and not scalable, right? And so once you reach a certain level, you really need a more robust, scalable solution for online visibility. And you mentioned earlier, right? It's about making the most out of your existing assets, your racks, your crates, your trailers, your containers, so you don't have to go out and buy more unnecessarily. These racks, they get sent in one direction and they get lost, right? And so you have to replace those. And so that is where the ROI is often. If you have a theft issue, that's where the ROI is. But there are other aspects too, like third-party compliance. You're just getting more efficiency out of your supply chain and out of your ecosystem of suppliers by always knowing where your assets are, I would say.
Steve, that is great stuff. I appreciate you joining.
Rick, thanks for having me here.
You're welcome.
I hope to see you more here in South Carolina. My wife and I, it's in our plans. Right. We're coming. Give us a few years.
Folks, that is Steve Logue. He is the general manager at Sensolus. They are a industrial-grade IoT tracking solution company, and this is what they produce right here.
Along with the software that manages
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Steve, I appreciate it. Folks, don't go anywhere. We are going to be right back with Randy Dunn. Randy is the Director of Operations at Itron. We're going to find out what's going on at that plant over in West Union. Be right back.